It's such a pleasure. It's such a privilege to have my mum here today. If you don't know who my mum is, her official name is Mynoo Blackbyrn, but she goes by the spiritual name of
Mynoo Maryel.
Mynoo Maryel. And my mum came from very humble beginnings, lower middle class India, to really thriving in the corporate world in London, England. And then about, what was it, 10 years ago, right? You decided. 2010, so we're talking 13 years ago. Wow, it's amazing, isn't it? So about 13 years ago, you decided enough of this. I'm going to follow my life's calling. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to make a difference in the world. And coaching was the medium that you chose to do it. Now, my mom, she launched her coaching business through her book called The Bee Book. Do you want to show the Bee Book?
This is the Indian version of it. It's sort of purple color when you go on it on Amazon.com. That's what it looks like.
And she used this book to basically launch her entire coaching career, right? So what she's going to be covering in today's Mentor Mastermind is her entire journey from start to finish, about how she came from corporate, launched the book, how she transitioned the book into making $500,000. It was $500,000 the first year, or was it less?
Just over $500,000.
Just over $500,000. So it's $500,000 her first year as a coach. And how old were you when you made $500,000 your first year as a coach?
I don't want to admit.
It's my mom, right? I can ask her these questions.
So I was 58.
58 years old, where she made a complete career transition and created an impact as a coach and made the kind of money that most coaches would love to make their first year, right? So she's going to go through that entire journey as well, to show you how she did it, so that you can really look at how you can launch yourself as a coach using a book. So with that, I also want to let you know that we are going to have a whole lot of technical issues on this Mentor Mastermind, because we basically have two people trying to figure this out. So don't worry about it. Consider it, as I always say, part of the charm. So with that, I want to welcome, let's give a round of applause, or give me a thumb on camera to welcome my beautiful mom, Mynoo Blackbyrn, Mynoo Maryel. Everyone, please say hi. Please say hi. There we go. She sees you all. Perfect.
Great. Thank you. Now, the first thing that I had to actually practice was to get the volume of my voice up to sort of match where Sai is at. So my voice is normally deep and it's very centering, and people go into a trance-like state. So just bear with me in case I go into that space, okay? So yes, my story, I was born and brought up in India, and India is a great place. It trains you very well for the competitive world, which it did for me. I was in the technology sector, trained me really well. I went to work in Saudi Arabia, where women weren't actually allowed to work. So I became an entrepreneur there. I had to literally think out of the box. And that's really where I first learned to become a coach, if you like. I went from corporate India into creating an institute for computer studies in Saudi Arabia, because that is what women could do. Women could be a teacher or a nurse or a doctor. I chose to be a teacher, and then moved on to live in London. And I was in London for most of my adult life, 35 years, until nothing that I did made any sense to me. People who looked at my life would have actually wanted a life like that. We lived in an amazing place in central London. We were all like, the relationship between us was absolutely beautiful. And yet, what I was doing, whatever it is that I was engaged in, it's as if there was a hollowness that I felt in my heart, felt disconnected from it. I spent all this time in the corporate world. I created the Inspired Leaders Network, worked with the top echelons of Fortune 500 companies, worked with boards of many of the companies that you already know of, and did a huge study over 6 years of leaders causing extraordinary results around the world. Got a chance to share speaking platforms with the likes of Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, all of those people, Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos, Said Godin. Many of these people were actually contributors, active contributors, even to the Inspired Leaders Network. And yet there was an interesting disconnect that was starting to develop within me. Now, whilst I was going through all of this, And Sai, I think I'm just getting so engrossed in talking my story that I'm actually not moving these photographs.
Which one do you want to show?
You just keep just keep going.
There we go. There's the first one. I'm not sure if that's the one you want or the other one.
Doesn't matter. So basically, Sai was with me throughout this journey. So there I am into the outside world, this high performer achieving phenomenal stuff. At home, on the other hand, was a very different ballgame altogether. This is when Sai was growing up. It was very different. I was in dysfunctional marriage at the time. Domestic violence was rampant, and went through a massive divorce. It was quite a complicated and quite a messy divorce, and emerged the other side of it. So actually, there was a very interesting story that was in the making. How do you juxtaposition two completely contradictory situations, one at home and one in the workplace? I developed a sense of empathy with others when I could feel or sense where they were at. I knew what I looked like when I was having a difficult time at home and I was putting on a front at work. I so wanted to share this story that it's actually okay, the world doesn't collapse, it's okay. But I just didn't know how to write. I was good at writing bullet points or PowerPoint slides or business plans and business reports. And anything else was a disaster. So I trained myself. With some amazing teachers who teach you how to write. Some of them were phenomenal journalists. I went through 3 types of writing courses. And in the end, the consensus was, and one of them actually put it really well. He said that, Mynoo, your speaking is good. But when you write, it is fog factor 90. Like, you cannot understand, I just go into a fog. So I suggest you just get a journalist who will be your voice. Now, in the corporate world, that's what I did. I got myself a journalist. He was my voice. And that's how the messages went out there. Press articles went out there. Columns were written by me, but they really were not written by me. It was my sentiment, my thought, but written by someone else. And all of that was fine in the corporate world. But really, what I wanted to do was to tell my story. And then, like Sai said, I got to a point where I wasn't really listening to my heart, feeling that something's missing. And lo and behold, I became extremely ill. And in the hospital, I was told I had to be there for 3 to 6 months to recover fully. And it was at that point I decided to choose to go away to Bali. And I went there for 3 weeks and then finally stayed there for 9 years. And some of the photographs of Sai and me, I don't know if you're sharing them.
Which ones do you want me to share? You just pick them.
Oh, can I see?
Oh, there we go. You just pick them.
So yeah, this is definitely one of our very special ones in Bali when we went dolphin hunting. That is great.
Wait, this is where the technical stuff happens, right? This one, right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Now, while I went to Bali, I also shaved my head, and Sai and me had a great laugh about it.
This one here, right?
It's this one here.
Is it that one there? Because this one here is so funny because the photographer literally cut off the top, right? So you never really know. Oh man.
So yes, I go to Bali. So I would often say Bali happened to you, and I guess Bali did happen to me. And it was there that I discovered the true calling of my soul, my soul's calling, and it became my personal mission, and that is the mission that I live by, which is to connect humans and humanity to the miracle that they are, so that expecting and accepting miracles becomes their norm. A miracle to me is where something beautiful occurs that makes your heart sing. And the fact that your heart is beating, that is the song of the heart. So it is singing. It's just a matter of making that connection. And then it was like, okay, if I'm to make that connection, I can't be just saying it to people. They have to make that connection. The connection actually occurs for them. I'm only a facilitator or a guide for that. Lots of stuff started occurring. I started writing. I started writing profusely. And it was downloads. And they would be completely perfect, pristine English. And I would often look at these downloads that
You might want to tell them what a download is.
well, I mean, I would just like get a feeling, oh, there is some wisdom that has come in, and I would get my iPhone out and go to the notes section and start typing. When I had written using my paper and pen for decades up to that point in time. So it all began with the iPhone and the notes thing,
Oh, wow. That's the excuse you used to use while you were always on your phone when I was growing up.
Yes, yes.
Before it was answering emails, then it was like downloads, right?
So, finally I decided that, okay, it doesn't matter that I don't know where this has come from. It all feels very spooky and weird, but it's happening to me. And what I've written is actually really good. Why don't I implement it? So I started implementing it. Because remember, what I was a businesswoman. I was a serial entrepreneur, and I was going through this journey. So it never occurred to me. I mean, even when we created the Inspired Leaders Network, my whole thing was, when it comes to leadership in a business environment, I want to learn from leaders who've been there and done that, not from some academic. Yeah, I did the usual tick in the box and MBA and all of that stuff, However, when it came to day-to-day running of a business, I wanted to learn from leaders. Similarly, now I was going through a particular journey, and this transition that was happening, it didn't occur to me to go find anyone from whom I could learn. I just couldn't think of anyone. Never grew up like that. So I started implementing my downloads. And in that implementation, the more I implemented, the more elaborate my downloads became. And I, shaved my head.
Let's get that picture up. This one here. Yeah, this one here.
Shaved my head. I mean, that's a very, very important picture. So I shaved my head, and
I'm going to have to do that soon as well.
And literally, I was like in bliss, head shaved, wearing the Bali frocks and a flower in my ear, and just really enjoying life, but following my intuition. What I felt like, I did. So at one particular point, I recall coming back from the ocean's sunrise, and my intuition said, turn right and go and park in this car park. It's a hotel. I go park in this car park, and there's a conference. It's a Global Women's International Network Conference. So I go to that, I buy the ticket, and I go into that conference. And the organizer was an American woman, and she asked the audience to present 2 or 3 perspectives that she could take to the United Nations. I presented 2 perspectives, and I sort of recall that when I looked at her, she had actually fallen asleep. And I thought, oh my God, maybe I've spoken too much. So I stopped speaking, I came back to my chair, and then at lunch break, everybody was making a beeline for her, and she made a beeline for me. And I thought, she's actually going to ask me to leave. So she comes up to me, she holds my hand, and she says, sit next to me over lunch, will you? And I go sit next to her at lunch, and she said, you thought I went to sleep, didn't you? I said, you did. And she said, no, I didn't. It is my guides that told me she's the one. She's the one you've been looking for in 132 countries. I run a network, it's got 1 million women, and I'm looking for a president, and I want you to be the president. I'm like, no, I'm retired, I'm in bliss, I'm not ready for any corporate work yet. I didn't think I would ever be ready for that. She insisted, she was relentless, did not let go of it. And this photograph, Sai, you were there at that event.
This was the event, right?
Yeah, which was the first annual conference in my presence. And I was speaking at that particular one. And that was the first time I actually shared my story of going to Bali and discovering the 7 pillars that I used as my pillars of living an extraordinary life, where all aspects of life coexist with joy, ease, and grace, omnipresent. And I was implementing them. I mean, coming from the corporate background, being a business entrepreneur, a serial one of the things that you learn as an entrepreneur is you are an implementer. Once you get your vision and you latch onto it, you relentlessly just implement. There's a resilience and a tenacity that comes with it. And here I was doing it where I was actually having all aspects of my life coexist. So I was thriving physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, socially, and environmentally. So there was a lot of empathy that I had with others who didn't quite understand, including my family, didn't quite understand what was on with me, right? So we had some various situations. So like, my nieces would often say, please, please, please do not post a photograph on Facebook. We don't wish to see your bald head. And I still continued. At that point, I was sharing my downloads with people that I was guided to share. And slowly people started gathering around me. I was sort of hovering between Australia and Bali and Singapore at that time. And people would gather and listen to it. Then I decided that it's taken me so many years to arrive at these 7 pillars. And I am truly living an extraordinary life where all aspects of my life coexist. So why don't I invite people in small groups into a retreat? And I teach them what I have learned and take them to exactly those places that made a huge difference to me. I was learning how to live with nature. I was learning how to have nature provide a very unique leverage to you having meaning in your life. And I wanted to teach that. So I started doing that, and people would pay, $5,500 each, and then that went up to about $7,500. And I had written so much stuff that it was time for me now to really share my story. Because everybody said to me, the reason why we are able to implement this is because we've seen you transform. My initial first 2 retreats were people who knew me before. And then they'd come in and they had gone through the journey and they had transformed and they'd seen me transform. One of them was my executive assistant, personal assistant, in fact, from 19 years ago. And she was the one who really took a stand for me publishing my book and getting it out there, to such an extent that she actually became a co-author of one of those collective books. And she learned every step how to make a book the bestseller. And she was the one that was part of the Coach Foundation team when you started your book journey. Yeah. She was the one that just was relentless in a stand for me writing my book. And she said, write your book and I will take it and make it a bestseller.
And she was, she is part of our book coaches, right?
Yes.
As well, that help our authors get to that point. And her very first one was with my mom.
Yeah. Now, what I realized was that it's one thing writing downloads, because they're somehow coming from a very different place. But when it is about writing my story, then my left brain would interfere. And there was so much that I wanted to say, and then my left brain would say, you can't possibly share this with the world. So I needed a structure. I needed a way in which to communicate that. And I'm good at learning about new systems and then implementing them, and I'm very thorough in how I implement. So I got myself a book midwife. Sai's business wasn't set up at that time in this way. So I got myself a book midwife, and she trained me on how to structure the book. And I went ahead and structured the book. And within 3 weeks after I structured the book, I structured the book actually on a flight from Denver to Philadelphia. The whole mind map of every chapter, every section it was downloaded even. It was done. And then from Philadelphia, I was flying into Dubai. I came to Dubai and I was there for 3 weeks and I wrote the book. The whole book was written. But that was a huge milestone in itself. Now, once that book was written, that's when rubber really hits the road. It doesn't hit the road until the book is actually written. That's the key thing. Now as a writer, your job is done, but as an author, you're not birthed yet. There's still several journeys to take place before you actually become an author. So I got that learning, the book was written, and then there was all this post writing, all of the editing and laying it out and all that stuff.
And this was this one here was the very first cover iteration, right?
Yes, and it's still available in that way.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's still available in that way on Amazon.com. Yes. So, I went ahead, got it all finally done, and I think there's a picture of me holding the book. I don't know.
Let me see if I can find it.
But it's as if everything shifted. From the day that the book actually got done, And we announced that we were going to run a week's campaign to launch. And we started doing day by day by day experiences for people, building up to the launch. Something started shifting. And I was doing these retreats, and people automatically assumed that they would be very difficult to get into. And somebody who was really keen to be part of it said, I don't know whether you talk about money or not, but I really would like to do it. I know that I can pay $25,000 this time around, but maybe next time I might be able to pay more. And I'm like, okay.
And this was during the whole promotion of the book,
Yes,
right?
yes.
When we were promoting this thing, we were seeing it become bestseller, and then you were getting these messages come in.
Yes, and I asked the person, I actually don't do private retreats. And he said, no, we are assuming that there'll be at least 10 to 12 other people, like our friend said. So I said, okay, and then the retreat started being $25,000 per person from that point on. Now,
and this was, I believe, the first retreat you had.
This is in Maui.
Yeah, this is the one you had in Maui.
Yeah. There's some pretty phenomenal people done there.
I know, right?
Yes. So that in itself shifted. I mean, I did nothing about that. It just occurred. It just got me to realize the power that lies in actually becoming a published author. And then when I became this best-selling author, and it was #1 bestseller in multiple countries.
It was 8 countries in the world, wasn't it? That the book ended up being a bestseller.
17 different categories.
Yeah.
And even the paperback was a #1 bestseller.
Just so you know, they can't see that, so you might want to hold it up.
Even the paperback was a #1 bestseller in 3 countries.
Nice.
It was very interesting.
And we actually we did a workshop for our high-ticket clients right after the launch of that, where we went through step by step how that was done, right? Because it was, how long was the process? I think it was 3 months that we were all planning it out.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, who would like access to that workshop, by the way? Like, where Mynoo and I were kind of going right off the heels of the best-selling book and showed you exactly how we did it. Would anyone like access to that? Just let me know in the chat. Okay, Dale, Andy. Got it. Great. Andrew, if you just keep a note about that, and we can send it out as part of the goodies for this session for everyone that stays.
The interesting thing for me was, okay, those retreats, they became very different. Now, what that enabled for me, I could have done the same amount of retreats. I was to do 5 a year. I chose to bring them down to 3 a year at 25,000, primarily because I'm really here living my mission. And doing the retreats, even though they were for 9 days, is what they used to be at the time. There was always a build-up, and there was a cool down afterwards, and then there was a 3 months of integration that people went through. Doing so many of these retreats, I somehow felt that people are paying 25,000, which is a lot more than what they were paying before. And I have to deliver a lot more. But actually, I didn't. It's just that their perception of me was completely different. It was in fact easier. The level of satisfaction was huge, because right at the get-go, they felt they were interacting with someone that they were so privileged to have access to. And because I walked into an environment of such reverence, I just ensured that I was doubly humble in how I showed up. And that, in fact, made it even more authentic. The container was very powerful. So as a result, there were a number of people who wanted me to work with them one-to-one. And I had just stopped doing that completely. And also, I started being invited to speak at major international conferences, because I was now proactively talking about my mission, running my mission from this is the Milken Summit.
You were speaking at the Milken Summit.
Yes. And this is in London. I went to London as well as Singapore there, which is very interesting, to be part of the future, Fast Futures group, which is where I was speaking.
And this was a retreat that you had in Bali, right?
Yes, and these are all phenomenal environmentalists that are seated here all the way around, from someone who is really made a massive headway in creating like a zero cost power to people who are into a form of architecting buildings such that when you walk into a building, you're actually living and breathing a healthy and by a healing environment. You know, paints are made out of crystals and all sorts of pretty phenomenal people. Because I was doing these retreats and these people who were so impactful in their own careers already were having such a huge transformation, I was being called to speak at these global events, which I didn't even know about. I mean, this is with Laura Turner. She's Ted Turner's daughter. Ted is the guy who created CNN. And, you know, this is a climate change conference that happens in Aspen, and I've been a regular speaker there. You know, this one here is, he was my co-speaker, and Reverend Durley, he's someone who actually marched with Martin Luther King. So it's very, very special. I mean, we have a very beautiful connection with him. And everybody started, and really the exciting thing for me was I was actually living this extraordinary life. All aspects of life were coexisting. I had a business that was actually earning money, and it was highly profitable, and it was giving me a chunk that I could actually keep aside to pursue my soul's mission and make a difference in the world at the same time.
And these retreats that you were running, they were not focused on anything, but they were more spiritual. How would you define the retreats?
Well, the retreats had a very specific function. They were about removing your hidden personal blocks. And they are these hidden saboteurs which act like autopilot. They are lodged at a subconscious level. They transform your subconscious level programming. That's what they do. So it's not spiritual. I go into a very logical step-by-step way in which I discover it for you, but you engage with my questioning in such a way that when I do reveal it to you, it all makes complete sense. And just seeing the dysfunctional patterns across all areas of your life, you recognize and understand why that is. Now, once you understand a problem, 90% of the solution is actually found. I then go into removing any limitations that you may have put in place artificially because of a mindset that you might hold around money. And then I literally take you and have you uncover that unique mastery, which is your soul's mastery that you're born with. That is why you are here. That is what gives you your mojo. That is that inner spark that you have. Now, once we've done this, you land in your soul's mastery. Now it's a matter of finding your passion and living your passion with joy, ease, grace, omnipresent. So the retreat is about all of that. Now, in amidst doing those very practical, mental processes, I also take you on spiritual journeys, and people have all sorts of pretty phenomenal experiences as they start releasing old stuff, past life stuff, trauma, emotional trauma that often people develop at work even, or maybe at home, or maybe what they might have witnessed in society. So all of it actually comes together.
Yeah.
So people leave living an extraordinary life. I know you and Jill experienced a huge transformation yourself.
Exactly.
I know that is the foundation of the relationship you have now, and the way you parent your children is very much foundation on that experience. And there are many, many others who have experienced it.
So bringing it back though. So the book itself was the thing that launched all of these retreats. You're running them before, but after the book came live, your prices were able to 5x. You had a waiting list of people. You were invited at event after event after event. And, it's just like you sent me a bunch of these pictures, right? It was just one after another.
This guy is the minister of Ayush, which is a holistic medicine ministry that is created in India. Very, very powerful.
Yeah.
Person.
And even, I think, was it 6 months ago, you were speaking at the UN well?
This was actually July. I've spoken at the UN twice. This is actually a conference that was created by someone who's a very dear friend now. She runs the Women's International Network from Rome, and this is a very women-centric conference that she had done at the UN HQ in Geneva, and I was there. I have spoken at the UN even before that in New York as well. And that was an interfaith group where there were over 600 interfaith leaders, and there were more than that were there online as well.
Yeah.
And that was a little bit interesting. I had no idea how big a deal it was. I was invited to do it. They wanted to fund me to fly to New York, and I was not, I was like in the middle of I call it a spiritual awakening space. So I wasn't going to fly to New York. I said I can do it as an online thing. COVID hadn't happened at the time, so online thing wasn't there. So they actually did a satellite connection, and I spoke there about miracles to an interfaith gallery, which was quite exciting to do that. Now the interesting thing is it gives you a gravitas, So I then started being invited to be honored and receive awards and things that I had not planned for. I sincerely thought, as you know, Sai, the home that I'd created in Bali was like a retirement home, exactly. Right? It was a beautiful villa and our own farm and everything. And then to be going around and speaking at, stages and collecting awards was very interesting and odd. Anyway, we carried on the book journey. It like literally opened up stuff, and it was literally like a bud blossoming, and I allowed myself to show up. My inner guidance was show up. This photograph is a radio show.
Boy, I need to just show this here. Which one do you want me to show? This is what I love, right? Is that these sessions are they're so live, and when you have my mum who's like clicking on the screen, like show this photo. And it's like, which one do you actually want me to see?
Oh, I think that was
which one? This one here, right?
Go for it.
Let's see if I can get it. Not this one. Not this one. Not this one. Where am I? Which one?
There's this one. This one here.
Which one? All right. We got it. Okay, here we go. Yeah, this one here.
Yeah, so this is actually a radio show with this guy. He's a monk, and he whenever he sings at the Carnegie Hall in New York, it is like standing room only. It's that kind of a space. His voice is the healer. And this has happened straight after the book. And she started, this is the host, Sunny Chase. She then actually has done several programs with me. She started asking me about the Be book and why be, and my whole philosophy of be and behave is in fact be and you have. It isn't let the doing flow. But we get so caught up in the do race that we forget to be, and therefore we actually don't have. Now, he changed his philosophy and chose the be word. I always say to people, you have your to-do list. What if you had a be list instead, and choose your be word for the day? And he actually started doing it for the next round of his conferences. And he then became a regular. It was like a regular booking that he had, which lasted for many months, like a Broadway show. And he was just singing by choosing to be. So it was very powerful.
And this is all off the back of the book, right? So this was the book launch tour that you did subsequently.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. Now, moving forward, Corona occurred, and actually even before we got to Corona, I was spending more and more time on my soul mission, which is all really about, at that point, creating and envisioning with my co-creators the World Dignity Forum as a conscious parallel to the World Economic Forum. And we seeded it in Los Angeles. And from that, what became very apparent was there was a real transformation that was required in terms of business models. And for business models to transform, it was important for leaders to become inspired leaders. And the body of work that I had done all those years ago with the 7 Habits of Inspired Leaders came right to the forefront. At that point, my business partner, Gaurav, and Sai, I spoke to Sai about this.
Yeah.
And Sai said, look, you don't need to do all that I do to go get people that you're from business that you need to mentor.
And this was, if I may interrupt for a moment, this was primarily because you had such gravitas, which was generated of the strategy that we did with the book launch. And so it was completely different because you were able to create such a reputation on the back of the book that people would just flock to you.
Yes.
And so she came to me and she said, oh, okay, what about this? What about this? What about this? And I was like, well, you have this great traction which was generated when we launched the book.
Yes.
Let's start using that.
Yes. And so I took on writing my next book, which is The 7 Pillars of Extraordinary Results. And that book, I wrote that book, and on the back, and we decided actually not to publicly publish it, but to have it as a foundation for the business collective, the Federation 100 that I launched. I launched it in India. And it was completely foundation on the 7 Pillars of Extraordinary Results, which I wrote as a book. Now, I knew these pillars, but the gravitas it got, because it was written in the form of a book that I used when I actually got people to come into the Federation, it completely transformed the impact it was having. It was completely, and it transformed the impact it was having because the receptivity was of a very different level altogether. Their relationship to me as a business mentor was completely transformed. If I didn't have the book, it would have been a few things from my business time, as opposed to having a book which actually there's a system to it, there's a methodology to it, and there's a step-by-step guide to it that they work through. So even though they were not given the book, I would read the chapters from the book, and the Federation was born. And sure, it continues, and we absolutely achieved more than 500 in our first year as a direct result. And it could have taken I don't know how much time, and there was no investment gone into it other than the time part, which was there, and that occurred because of the advice you gave me and the stand that Gaurav and I took together. That we are going to foundation the business on the gravitas of this body of work.
Yeah.
And that is massive. That is massive. So.
And if I may interrupt for a moment, how old were you when you launched the Fed? The Fed is the short form for the Federation 100, the program.
Yes, it was May 2019, so I was just 58 and a half years old.
So 58 and a half years old, and you were speaking to business leaders who basically paid you $500,000 the first year to work with them.
Yeah.
And there were some amazing transformations as well, right? So that goes without saying.
Yeah. Businesses were just naturally triple their turnover, and the whole COVID times was such that many of these industries had completely collapsed. And yet, that you're a member of the Federation, that our members continue, not only continue, they're actually thriving and growing. And every week I have that this is the best week in this and this is the best week in that from different members. The great thing is that the book provides a structure to your own thinking. So when you choose to, like the B book, this is my story. And this is the story of my transformation from being someone who is absolutely brilliant and a sure shot winner guaranteed in the do race to actually becoming the bee queen, the queen bee, and achieving even better results and with greater fulfillment. That is what the bee book is about.
Yeah.
Now, the 7 pillars of extraordinary results, having done the bee book first and having had all of this spiritual, like there's one photograph here.
Well, which one do you want me to show?
Which is the one that I'm speaking to these thousands and thousands of people.
Let me see if I can find it. Keep talking, I'll find it.
It's up there.
Which one?
Yeah.
That one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Got it. I'll find it, don't worry.
So, having done the bee work and having then, spoken at these spiritual conferences as well. Here, this was like
this one.
Yeah, this was like a sea of people. There were people behind me, in front of me,
and this was outside the doors as well.
Yeah, the thing. Yeah. It was just like, it was this endless ocean of people that I was speaking to. They spoke Marathi or they spoke Konkani, and I was speaking in English and Hindi and combination of all of that. But the vibe of that was my philosophy. It is about how I'm being, which is what kept them engaged. Now, having done that, to then make a switch into a business mentor and a spiritual confidant could only be possible because I wrote the book.
Exactly. Of
the 7 pillars of extraordinary results. So the combination of the two really does give you a very good sense of what it's like. Now, if I was to share with you, what is it that you can take away If you have a story, your story is best told in your words. It is told in your voice. Okay. Now, there is a structure to how you create a book, and it's a very logical structure. And the more you plan it, and the level of detail, I use mind maps to do the planning of my books, my chapters, my sections, my paragraphs, as well as my examples. And once the mind map is done, it's just a matter of writing those two or three little sentences in each one, and the book starts to come together. So there is a methodology how you tell your story. Don't worry about even reading what you've already written yourself until you have completed the book. This is where the writer's block kicks in. When you start reading and then you want to go back and correct and go back and correct, and then you get so fed up that you're not even making progress that and now I have a writer's block. Well, just keep going. Just keep going. Take your time to plan, and plan meticulously, layer by layer by layer, and then you start writing, and keep going until you get to the end. Now, once you get to the end, even then you don't read the book. This is a very important part of what I learned, which I'd like to share with you. When you get to the end, you line up at least 15, 20 people who who agree to give you their feedback, and you ask them 7 to 12 questions, no more than 12, no less than 7, on specific points that they may have about the book. Give them 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and in those 3 weeks, assuming you get 7 to 10 responses, it's great. If you don't, then you need to expand your circle. Do not read their feedback. Just do not read their feedback. Just receive it all. And once you get it all, then you I created a Google Sheet, and I plotted the answer to each of the questions from each of the participants. I had an assistant who was doing that ongoingly as she was receiving it, but I was not reading it.
Yeah.
And it was after all of that, after all of these things were there, then I allocated another 2 weeks to myself. And I went through the feedback and I decided which ones I was going to take, which ones I was not going to take. Okay. And that is when you complete your part of the book. Now, because at this point, it goes to an editor. Okay, up to this point, editor has not had anything to do with it. At this point, now it goes to the editor. You have completed your written manuscript. You now give it to the editor. The editor will do whatever they do. You have to give the specification to the editor, what type of editing you want. You do not wish your voice to be changed. It has to be your voice. So it has to be edited such that the English and the enunciations or the way in which you write it does not interfere in the reader getting a gist of what the book is about. Now, once the editor has completed the book, then there is a whole point or the whole piece that begins in terms of designing it, laying it out, book cover designs, all that stuff. Now, whilst all of that is happening, the next piece kicks in, which is how do you actually get people to know about your book? And that is a whole different ballgame altogether. And with social media and now that the reels and all that are so rampant, it's a little bit different even than when I launched the ebook. There'll be a different way in which you will build up in different geographies, and that's something that the Coach Foundation team is absolutely masterful and expert in. And I'm sure they will guide you when you get to that point. But your invitation to me to share today really was encouraging all of you we all have a story. We all have gone through some pretty phenomenal experiences in life. And many people out there experience it and they don't know how to deal with it. The fact that you're here, you have come out the other side, even though you may not feel it, but you have addressed many issues and you've come out the other side of it. There are others who could benefit from that. So you have a story. And when you share that story, it automatically does something to you. You become a really powerful, insightful, empathetic coach. Because even as you write the book, even as I wrote the ebook, I was like, wow, I was actually quite an amazing distiller of my experiences, even at a very young age. I had no idea, but as I was writing the ebook, I saw how much I unlearned from my life experiences. And many people say to me, when they read my ebook, they realize they also have had these little, big, deep experiences in their childhood that they made mean as nothing, or they made it mean as something really bad. But when they read the ebook, they realize that actually they got this core strength that they have comes from there. Now, when you discover that about yourself, and then you show up as a coach, there's a level of authenticity. There's a level of connection that you make with your clients. There's a gravitas that you automatically exude that makes you far more endearing and far more magnetic for anyone that wishes to be coached through whatever it is that their life is calling or their business is calling at that particular point in time. So I strongly encourage everyone. I had like reconciled that book I'm never going to write. I now have 182 books that have come through me. Many of them are like very, very powerful. I call them downloads, but they are downloads that I've implemented. So they're not just downloads. They're actually downloads with the richness of implementation by me and many of my clients all over the world who have implemented those. So each of those is a very rich book indeed.